Welcome everyone, and welcome to our sixth film of our virtual Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival. My name is Neil Popish. I am the program director with the JCC, a division of Jewish Nevada. I wish to express our thanks to the Israeli American Council for co-sponsoring this film with us. I also want to thank Abbey and the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival for our great partnership we've had over these past 6 months. Special thanks to the Robinson and Frankoff families for their sponsorship and dedication to Jewish films. We hope that you have enjoyed these series of films and webinars that follow. Please visit the newly updated Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival website at www.lvjff.org for updates and links to past webinars. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch starting tomorrow on the Jewish Nevada YouTube page. Once our Q&A with our panelists is completed, I will then ask questions from our participants. If you have a question for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We will ask as many questions as we can in the time allotted. I'd like to welcome our panelists. First, we're honored to welcome Arik Bernstein. Arik has been a leading force in the Israeli film industry for the past 20 years. He has initiated and overseen numerous documentaries, drama, and documentary series, as well as a multitude of international co-productions. His films and programs have been screened in major film and TV festivals worldwide and have been awarded numerous Israeli and international prizes. In 1993, Arik established Matar Productions, later forming Alma Films in 2003. Also joining us as always is the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival Director, Joshua Abbey. And now I'd like to hand over the webinar to Joshua Abbey.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and mostly thank you to the audience who is joining with us today. It is a great honor to have Arik with us and his amazing film, which everybody online, I'm assuming, has had the pleasure to experience. We'll start right away. Arik, like Kishon, you obviously had a passion in life to create cinema. I'm curious, where did that come from? How did you first get engaged? And what are you, do you feel are your greatest hits, or what you've achieved the most? And you can take it from there.
Oh, good question. I mean, I started out as a photographer, still photographer, as a kid actually. I had my own dark room in my mother's washing machine, room. When I was around, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something like that. That went on to working on films. I went to NYU Film School as a cameraman, and then when I returned here in 1980, I worked for at least, I don't know, 10 or 15 years as a cameraman all over Israel and the world. And then in 93, I started producing. I produced what was then a kind of groundbreaking comedy sketch series called the Chamishia Kamerit, which means the Chamber Quintet. And around, I guess, 15, 20 years ago, I started mostly focusing on documentaries, mostly actually documentary series, historical documentary series. We made a big series on Israeli rock music, about Israeli cinema, quite a few historical films. And Kishon was a passion because we did a big TV series on Israeli and Jewish humor, and obviously we dedicated one episode to Kishon. So I had a former initiation with him, and also when I grew up, 60s, 70s, Kishon was the first page you went to when you opened your newspaper in the morning. He had a daily, how do you say it? A daily column in what was then the most popular Israeli newspaper. And a daily column is crazy. I mean, 6 days a week for over 20 years. That's unthinkable. And that was the first thing everybody read, including myself.
What struck me about Kishon in the film was how his evolution to cinema came about, the way he described wanting to bring his characters and his writing more to life, and that led him to the stage and the theater, and then wanting to have even more control and not let the actors do all the interpretation of his intent, and then that leading to cinema where he had more control to crystallize his vision.
Yeah, Kishon, I think we have it in our film, but if you would have asked him, Kishon considered himself first and foremost a writer. Before anything else, first of all, he was a writer. I mean, he has his thing, which he has like this. He has I think it's called an H2 or something like that pencil, which he used to write. We're talking about days prior to computers, obviously. And he used to write all those columns, and he was a writer. And then when he came to Israel from Hungary, late 50s, without Hebrew, obviously, he didn't know a word of Hebrew, and he taught himself. It's amazing the way he, almost from the dictionary, he taught himself Hebrew. And he taught himself Hebrew to the extent that he invented a new language in many ways. And within 2 or 3 years, he had a huge hit theater, a play, and then another one, and then another one. And then he wrote a script for a film, which he hated. He couldn't stand the film. So he said, okay, I can do this, I know what I want, and I can direct, and he did. And just if I may, everybody talks about it, all the people who work with him said that he had this ability to know what's funny and what's not. I mean, when he used to do rehearsals, he used to tell his actors, okay, now we need a pause. A short pause, because it's going to be a small laugh. And then now we need a longer pause, because the audience is going to laugh a lot. And he was correct every time to the button. And he did 4 films, which we know, 4 films which were huge hits in Israel. We're talking about Israel, which is at that time, I don't know, 2.5, maybe 3 million people. And he sold almost 1.5 million tickets, which is crazy. And then he did his, we'll get to that if you want. We did his 5th film, which bombed. Nobody wanted to see it. And he dropped out. I mean, he said enough. In the meantime, had, I think, 2 Golden Globes, nominated for an Academy Award twice, which is unheard of for an Israeli film director at that time during the 60s. So he's really you can't understand Israeli humor, Israeli film. He's like really the founder.
How important were satire and comedy in Israeli culture early on as a response to the aftermath of the Holocaust?
I think that probably besides Kishon, he was really, in many ways, the first and the only one. It was a small country. Everybody was very careful. I think satire and humor would have been very healthy for Israeli society. It came much later, which is in many ways, which is kind of strange, because, Jewish humor is something which has been going on for hundreds of years at least. I mean, if you go back to, the Jewish writers, the Shalom Aleichem, I mean, Jewish humor till this day and Jewish musicals, we all know. But in Israel, satire was felt as critical. You don't criticize the country. You don't criticize the government. You don't criticize the army. You don't criticize. We're lucky to have what we have, and shut up.
Did he have do you think he made a conscious decision to use those tools as a response to the trauma of the society in a deliberate method?
Look, I think we have to go back and understand where he comes from. I mean, he comes from Hungary, from Budapest, as a child, growing up, like many Jews from Europe, not even realize he was Jewish. I mean, it didn't mean much to him. You know, like so many survivors tell us that they, you know, Hitler made them understand that they're Jewish. And then he joined after the war, which he survived somehow. Like he says in the film, my psyche was kind of formed by Hitler, not by my parents, which a lot of survivors to say till this day. And he joined a satirical weekly publication in Budapest. But when he understood that he's went a bit too far, and you know, Hungary today as well, but definitely Hungary during communist time in the 50s, this is not something that you do. He more or less got up. So satire and humor for him was built in. It didn't start in Israel. So it's kind of it's in his DNA, I would say, more than.
Did he have a relationship with Yiddish literature? Did he speak Yiddish? And
actually, not that I know of. I don't think so. He knew the Yiddish writers, you know, again, Shalom Aleichem and you know, Yud Lamed Peretz, all those. But good question. I don't think he knew Yiddish. It definitely wasn't a spoken language in his when he grew up or in his home.
Interesting.
You know, we have that scene in the film where his daughter Renana and his son Amir say that, you know, he used to drive through the streets of Tel Aviv, open the windows, and he had these little cassettes, you know, for which we used to have in the cars with speeches of Hitler, and he used to put it on full volume and scream, say, fuck you, I made it. And that was his kind of way of dealing, again, a humoristic way of dealing with what he went through, dealing with the Holocaust.
So now that the survivors generation is passing on, I'm very interested because, you know, one of the missions of our film festival and many film festivals is to use cinema related to the Holocaust to help keep the memory alive. And it's one of the most effective means to do so. Mm-hmm. How is that attitude or that responsibility vis-a-vis the cinema in Israel evolving?
Relative to Kishon or generally?
Well, Kishon obviously is a film about a survivor, right? And
yeah.
And so, you know, how does it evolve from that? You know, will we keep revisiting the personal histories of survivors for many years to come, or do you have a sense of that?
Again, I mean, the Holocaust is something which is so embedded in Israeli society and in Israeli culture, still to this day. I mean, my partner just completed a film, which was directed, I forget the name, the brother of Gwyneth Paltrow is a film director, and he made a film, which I can't tell you the story because I don't know exactly, but the film was about the crematorium they used to burn Eichmann's body in 1962 after the trial. And that they finished shooting a week ago. So this is something which is still going on. There's a big, big discussion in Israel, I think in Israel probably more than in the States, of how the Holocaust is used politically, which it is and has been. Different issue, but definitely this is, the Holocaust and the survivors and is something which, I hope will never go away, because I think, this is something way beyond Israel. This is something we all want to remember, and we hope that our children, grandchildren, etc., will always remember.
How do you, as a producer, how do you feel about what seems to me a new emphasis on the value of documentary versus narrative? And I almost feel like we're entering a golden age for the documentary. Do you see it coming more to prominence as well?
Look, I've been doing documentaries, only documentaries, for about, I'd say 15, 20 years. And I think Israeli documentaries, for some reasons, over those 15, 20 years have been worldwide, you hardly have a major film festival in the States or in Europe which don't have at least between 1 and 3 Israeli documentaries. And I think, yes, we look at Netflix. The biggest hits on Netflix are documentaries, documentary series. Some are good, some are not so good, etc., etc. But, Michael Jordan, it's a documentary. The Guy with the Tigers, this is a documentary. So not exactly my style, but doesn't matter. I think documentaries, we can talk about the reasons. I'm not exactly sure, because of reality, because of different things, but no doubt documentaries are worldwide, are being, like you say, it's the heyday of documentaries. And I think it's going to be more and more. And if we can get into, these days with what the world is facing with COVID-19, etc. Documentaries can more or less, we can still do documentaries. Hard to do anything else, but we can do documentaries.
Tell us a little bit, since you are speaking from Israel. I don't think the audience was aware of that. What the state is there. I'm assuming movie theaters are not open. How is it impacting culture and society right now?
Well, movie theaters, not only movie theaters, music venues, you name it, are all closed. I just went on Facebook before we talked, and there's a guy, because the beaches, people still go to the beach in Tel Aviv. So, you have the kind of where the lifesavers, the lifeguard sits. So that's where people go and perform, bands go and perform. They don't make any money, but at least, people listen. But everything is closed down. The coffees are open, but all the culture is closed down. And film production has gone down, 60, 70%. Very, very bad situation. I do quite a bit of documentaries, so I know that the situation in France, in Germany, in England is not any better. I don't think we're in a worse situation like anybody else. Like you told me a little bit of what's going on with you guys. Things are shut down, and the problem is, we all know the problem is that nobody really sees where and when this is going to end. So
let's shift back to our subject. Tell me a little bit about Kishon's relationship with America, because that seemed
with America.
You didn't really get into depth of that too much in the film.
No, well, he didn't really. Well, it was interesting because I think it was after he won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. At least he says that. I'll go a little bit back, but our film is based on a book which was written by himself and a famous journalist called Yaron London. And he went to Switzerland and sat with Kishon for about, 2-3 weeks. And he wrote this kind of biography. And the story goes that when Yaron is a good friend of mine, so he sent him the book to review. And Kishon called him and he said, Yaron, the book isn't funny. So he said, of course it's not funny. What do you want? It's funny. Holocaust, communists, you come to Israel, poverty, how's it? And Kishon tells him, but there are no jokes. It won't sell. And he added jokes to his own biography. So every story that we know about Kishon, it's his story. And we decided when we made the film to accept that if Kishon says that's what happens, so it happens. If it really happened, I don't know. So going back to America, he says that he had a huge offer to do, Talat Blaumilch, I think it's called, what is it called in English? When they build a canal in the middle of Tel Aviv, he had an offer to make a remake, to make an American remake. And by some big producer, I'm not sure. And he said, okay, what do you want? $100,000? No. $200,000? $500,000? And Kishon said, listen, I'd love to have $1 million, but I can't live anywhere else. So so America he wouldn't have fit in America. And the interesting thing is, which is amazing, is his huge success in Germany. Because his books sold over 35 million copies in Germany. He used to joke that there are two books that sold more copies in Germany, Mein Kampf and the Bible, and then Kishon. That was Kishon's way of describing his success. And 35 million books is huge when you're talking about 70s, 80s. So, and it's interesting, why Germany? Why, from all places, the German people loved him and worshipped him, and we go into this a little bit about in the film, but it's an amazing phenomenon that Germany, from all places, that's the country that made him rich, that bought all his books, and really admired him till his last day.
Well, and potentially gave him the most satisfaction because he was able to overcome his oppressors.
Absolutely.
Do you think his children were right in their assessment that almost everything he did was a reaction to his trauma from what happened to him in his youth?
I'm not sure. I mean, I definitely, it's a major thing, but I also think that there's something, as I said before, in his DNA, in his deep down, like any of us, it kind of fit in. But I think the combination of what he was and the Holocaust and the way he survived the Holocaust and coming to Israel as a immigrant with nothing and knowing nobody and not even understanding the language, that definitely is a super major part of his psyche and of his talent, no doubt.
I was very, very impressed with how the film captured his tenderness, his sensitivity, his extreme, human qualities, and also, really revealed how much he needed the approval and the recognition, that was very essential to him. And then the whole departure of Israel after, everything it had meant to his identity. Is it really simply a matter of the mainstream rejecting him that pushed him away? Or do you think there's something in what his children said about having to go home, to come back to the source?
I don't think so. I think, like you said, I think it was more a matter of rejection. And I'll tell you a story about that. A very well-known Israeli director, Avi Nesher, you might have heard of. He made his first film, which is called the La'aka, the band.
Great film.
Exactly when Kishon came out with his fifth film. And he called him up and they talked, and he was like his master, this was God, basically. And Kishon told him on a very kind of sincere moment, he said, I'm not going to do any films anymore. And Avi said, why? I mean, you made 5 films. 4 were masterpieces. They made hundreds and thousands, millions of people, Academy Awards. So you made one film which was a flop. So what, And Kishon said, that's not the problem. He said, the problem is I still think that my film is very good. And if the audience didn't like it, then I lost my touch. And if I lost my touch and I can't understand the audience anymore, not the mainstream, the new audience, the younger audience, then I should not make films anymore. And he quit, totally. He quit writing. I mean, he rewrote his books, and he had lots of his plays on all over Europe and maybe the States, I'm not sure. But he didn't make any more films because he felt that he doesn't understand the younger audience, the audience of the 60s and 70s. They spoke a different language.
That's an incredible psychological dichotomy, that someone who has the wherewithal, to produce and create a film would be that receptive to the so-called perception, and how it's received at the moment. Wow. So we were talking earlier about the Ashkenazi Sephardim cultural reality in Israel, and you said that Kishon had some position on that, or?
Well, you talk about his first film, Salach Shabati, which was in many ways, it till this day, many people, mostly intellectual, Mizrahi intellectual, Academy people, feel that he kind of mocked the new Mizrahi immigrants from Morocco or from Iraq, or he doesn't really, he's not clear where they came from. And Kishon, when he was faced with those accusations or criticism, he said, you don't understand, he's an immigrant. I made a film not about a Mizrahi character, I made a film about an immigrant, like me. And in many ways, if you look at the film, if you kind of think about Salach Shabati, the main criticism of the film is not on the Mizrahi. The main criticism and satire of the film is about the Israeli mainstream establishment. There's a great scene in the film where he's, in the mud and it's pouring rain, and he does this monologue, which is like Zero Mostel in Fiddler on the Roof, God, why, etc., etc. And then there's a flash, a lightning, and there's a poster, lights up, and it says, vote for Mapai, which is the party at that time, which you vote for. Nobody did. I mean, that was early 60s. Nobody did things like that. So he was very subversive, much more subversive, I think, than people realize.
Did he ever have aspirations to enter politics? Was he not persuaded by people to do so?
I doubt it, and he wouldn't have lasted a week. I don't think. I mean, he's, people who have a big mouth, I don't know. I mean, your president might think differently. Maybe today, yes, people with big mouths actually do pretty well. But at that time, I don't think, and why should he? He was, he had everything. He had a daily column. He had, 5 huge hits. He had plays on. I don't think he needed, no, I doubt any kind of political aspirations.
He certainly wasn't beholden to special interest.
No.
He had his own voice, his own sense of truth.
But he was, another thing was that, if Tel Aviv, there's what used to be the kind of main street of Tel Aviv, Dizengoff, which all the kind of the bohemian guys and, people used to sit in cafes, with shorts and sandals and, sloppy t-shirts. And Kishon used to walk around with a 3-piece suit in August with a tie. First of all, he was European. I never forgot it. I mean, he never left the psyche of being a European. He hated the Levant, you know, he didn't like the Middle East. He loved Israel as a Jewish country, but he didn't like the Middle East. He was a European, and he used to sit in the cafe with 2 or 3 other Hungarian friends of his, all in suits and ties, drinking his coffee. And it was, and yes, and people made fun of him, and people didn't like that.
So are there modern descendants of Kishon today who are having the same impact?
If you talk to any young film director, whether in film schools or right after, Kishon is the #1, you know, director that you look up to. I mean, there is no Israeli cinema without Kishon. And his characters, the way, I mean, if you talk about the Shoter Azulai, I don't know if you the English name, which you know, the cop, the policeman. These are models for Israeli actors and Israeli writers and Israeli directors. They all look up to him, and they all know his film in way, you know, backwards, inside and backwards. I mean, every line. So absolutely, I mean, it's not that he's gone and forgotten. Everybody knows him.
A couple of questions I want to put together. First of all, point of clarification. The voice of Kishon in the documentary, in the animation, who is that?
Well, what happened, the story is kind of a sad story, but when, as I said before, when Yaron London went to Switzerland and talked to Kishon in order for him to write his biography, he recorded, obviously, he recorded these talks for 2-3 weeks. And he lost the tapes.
Oh no.
Or at least he said he lost the tapes. I spent 3 years. I said, Yaron, you didn't lose them. I mean, give me a break. What, would you want money? I mean, what's the problem? And he said, no, I lost them. I don't know where they are. So we took Yaron, who's a very big guy. We kind of narrowed him down in animation. And we took a very good actor, Shmuel Vilozhny, who's one of the top Israeli actors. And his voice is the voice of Vilozhny. Now, we didn't want an imitation. I mean, we could have found a better imitation, because we wanted an actor. We wanted a real actor to play Kishon, because we wanted the emotion there. And, you know, you guys in the audience can say if we managed or not, but that was the goal.
I believed it was his voice, so I think
okay.
most of the audience did as well.
That's good.
So congratulations. Yeah. That worked well. So the other part of my question is, in revealing the personal life so deeply, and then the contrast between the artist and the person, how do we differentiate there? You know, how do we know where we cross the line, you know, where it's too personal, or the person, you know, the personal shouldn't bleed into the work, you know, or the way the work is canonized? Well, that's a documentary dilemma, right?
It's a documentary dilemma, and I think it's more and more. We see it, you know, we see it these days, and definitely more and more, very rightly so. I mean, you know, we have definitely in the past 2-3 years with Me Too, with what happens with many Israeli actors, American actors who misbehave, to say the least. So what do you do? I mean, what do you do? I know with my kids, what do you do with Rudyard Kipling, you know? You continue reading Mowgli and Jungle Book with this guy who was probably the #1, you know, anti-Semite and white supremacy. I mean, where do you differentiate? I'm beyond me, but Kishon wasn't a nice guy. Everybody says that. He was a genius. You know, Kishon used to play chess on the phone with 5 people simultaneously without looking at a chessboard. He was a master, a chess master. I mean, like an international chess master. But he wasn't a nice guy. He wasn't a guy which you came, which, you know, you had friends and you come and you say my problems with my kids or with my wife or with my husband, whatever. That wasn't his thing. He wrote. And that's what he did, you know, and we have that in the film. He gets up in the morning, he drives around, he fixes things, and then he closes his room, which, if you remember in the film, had these soundproof doors, which look like an atomic bomb shelter. And nobody ever disturbs him while he was writing. And he wrote till 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and that's what he did. So he's not a social, you know, mingling kind of a type. Maybe in his later years when he was in Europe, you know, but he didn't have the pressure of it. But in his peak, you know, when he was 20, 30, 40, 50, he wasn't a social guy. He wasn't the guy who, you know, ran around sitting in cafes and you know, gossiping, et cetera, et cetera.
Before we open it up to our participants for questions and comments, I just would like you, since you have such a long experience with especially cinema in Israel, to get your opinion on the role of Jewish film festivals in helping to disseminate Israeli cinema to the world.
First of all, I've been showing my films in Jewish film festivals for at least, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I'm actually American, originally. My parents come from Philadelphia. So American Jewish families are not something which is, you know, I'm no stranger. And I think, you know, and there are at least 150, 200 film festivals, Jewish film festivals in the States, big or small or whatever. And I think it's phenomenal. I mean, I mean, I've been to dozens of them, and they're always interesting, and people are interested, and people want to, you know, ask questions, whether it's an Israeli film or a film that relates with Jewish issues. You know, when I did the sketch show called the Chamber Quintet, the main sentence which everybody remembers from that show is, haven't the Jewish people suffered enough? You know, just kind of as a joke. And again, I mean, Jewish humor and Jewish musicals and Jewish films. I think this is, you know, it's part, as far as I'm concerned, this is part of who I am, and I think part of what we all are. I mean, this is essential. So I think it's more than just having fun. I think it's really, really important to have more, you know, Jewish film festivals and as many people come. I wonder, you know, you can tell me if there's, you know, what the age of the audience is like. I mean, I'd like to believe that also younger audiences come to Jewish film festivals. I don't know if that's the case. Would be nice if that would be the case.
Well, I mean, the reality is that, of course, the majority of audiences for Jewish film festivals skew much older, 60, 70 and above are the majority. And there was a lot of concern about, you know, not engaging younger audiences. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, over the years, the program directors of these festivals realized that their numbers were pretty much the same. You know, they weren't getting lower as people, you know, passed on. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that people age into it. It's almost as if, you know, when they have more time to re-embrace their culture and their identity, you know, then they want to socialize and explore Jewish cinema. And personally, I think that's okay, you know.
No, it's definitely. Plus, I think maybe that, you know, I definitely Israeli films are getting younger in terms of style and in terms of the subject matters. They're getting more political and more social. So I think that actually today, programming Israeli and Jewish film festivals are able, I think, to engage a younger audience than maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Well, I also think that the twist of fate that brought us to this online platform, which, you know, it's been very fortunate. Cinema makes an easy pivot and lends itself, you know, to the internet. And actually these talks with the filmmakers, in my opinion, have greater emphasis now when they're not tagged on to the end of a screening. When people are fatigued or, you know, need to go. Now they have to tune in just for the talk after they've had, you know, a window to watch the work and to think about it, you know. So I think that's a big advantage. Plus, I think the other advantage is you're more likely to find a younger audience through this medium as well.
Yeah.
So we're pioneers here. And on that note, I'd like to open it up, Neil, to people who are with us who want to join the conversation.
All right, I do have a few questions here. So my first question I have is from Tony. And Tony says, thanks for a great film and this illuminating interview. Why haven't we heard about Ephraim Kishon before in the US? Was his humor lost in translation?
Good question. I'm not sure I can answer. Kishon is, as I said before, is very, very overly well known in Europe, in mostly in German-speaking countries. Again, for the older generation. Is he lost in translation? Might be lost in translation. Might be lost in terms of the culture. You know, it's not. I mean, you know, we always have this discussion about films, about books. Do they travel? Some do, some don't. I think, for example, a film like Te'ala Blamich, like The Canal, could travel to the States because it talks about bureaucracy, and that's what Kishon is. And bureaucracy is everywhere. I mean, we all know what bureaucracy is. I mean, you have bureaucracy in Israel, and we have bureaucracy in Germany, and you know, God knows we have bureaucracy in America. This is nothing. It's not a Jewish invention. So, but I think America is. I mean, United States is a difficult country to break into because in terms of language, I know that from my films. So why haven't you heard? I don't know. Good question. But I think it's difficult to follow Kishon, and today probably even more because Kishon talks about Israel during the 60s and during the 70s. You know, it's a different country, it's a different world.
Well, I'd like to add that there's no question that your film will change that.
I hope so.
And bring his awareness to a much broader audience.
I hope so.
All right, I have a question from Sandra who's asked, why did you choose to use the live action animation to tell part of Kishon's story?
As I said before, we started the whole project when we looked for, you know, how are we going to tell the story? It started from this book, this biography that I said that Yaron London, a very acclaimed journalist, went to Switzerland where Kishon lived and talked with him for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and that was the basis of the film. But we didn't have Kishon, and actually, like I said before, we didn't even have the recordings. So we looked for a way to use the book, to use the discussion, to use a first-person testimony, and you know, animation is tricky because you can lose the audience. You can, always the question, is it believable? Is it not? So it was a tricky decision. I hope we did well. But the main reason was, again, to bring Kishon and Kishon's story, a person telling it, but he's not around. So the best thing we could do is using animation.
Thank you. I have a question from Joanne, who asks, how was this film received by critics and audiences in Israel?
Well, the film actually came out in Israel as a 3-part series, 52 minutes. The film that you've seen is actually, we took the 3 hours and made it into a 90-minute, which I always think is better because, as I tell my student, I've never seen a film which can't be shortened by 10, 15 minutes. Right? Josh, I can see you agree with me. People loved it, actually. People really, really, really loved it because, again, the older generation, not much older generation, they all remember Kishon. Everybody knows Kishon. And the younger generation said, whoa, this guy's funny. I mean, he is a funny guy. He writes, so his humor comes across. So it did actually, it was on television, but it was all over Israel in cinemas and went on. And still people, many places will show the film, and it did well. It did well.
Great. Bobby would like to know, what was his last wife Jewish and German?
Non-Jewish whatsoever, not even a little bit. Very German, very, very German. Looked German, but no, I'm afraid, sorry to say, she wasn't Jewish even a little bit.
What was her reaction to the film?
Good question. I haven't the slightest idea.
Okay.
We met it. We went and talked to her. As you see, there's a little part of her in the film. She was very nice. And she was very candid. If you remember, she shows us his little box, which he had his little gun and cyanide pills, which is pretty crazy. But I'm not sure she even saw the film. Actually, I'm writing this down. I'll make sure that she sees it. It's a good point.
All right. Francesca has just a comment to start about Kishon's work being lost in translation. She lived in Israel for 15 years, and for sure she can say that unless you're a part of the culture and understand the nuances of the language and sense of humor, she can see how his work would not translate well to the United States. Her question is, did any of his children follow in his footsteps of writing?
His older son is a, how do you say, a doctor of animals,
Veterinarian.
Veterinarian, very successful veterinarian. His Renana has an art gallery, and his youngest son is a mathematician, very, very bright, lives in New York, just sold his high-tech. No, the answer is no. His older son is very much, more than his brother and sister, tries and has a show that he goes on about Kishon, and he tells stories about Kishon, which is very successful actually. But none of them are creative in the sense of writing their own stuff. No, totally not.
Thanks.
Let's take Neil.
That's all the questions I have from the audience at this point. If anyone has any other questions, feel free. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make, before we say goodbye, I just want to make one observation. To me, it was so profound, the metaphor of playing chess with the commandant, and the fact that he realized he could never lose to him, and you assume that he was also an excellent chess player. But it reminded me of the Bergman scene in Seventh Seal, playing chess with death, right?
Yeah, with the angel of death.
And his whole life then became a chess match in that regard of having to always feel like he's the master.
And he has this scene in the film, I think it's in the film, not in the series, where he's in the camp during the Holocaust. And he has an argument with a top SS officer about the first move or the third move that he was supposed to do. I mean, and so, and the guy, the SS officer was so impressed by this Jewish nothing in the camp who knew all the moves and all the, you know, how do you say, the beginnings of chess, that he said, okay, you come with me, we play chess every night. And Kishon was very, very careful. Does he win or does he lose? I mean, if he wins, then he has a problem. But if he loses, then what is he worth? So chess is definitely a very major part of his personal history.
Well, on behalf of everyone involved in creating this event today, and I know it's getting late in Israel. What time is it there? 10 in the evening? 2200?
Yeah, almost 11.
Yeah. Thank you for staying up late with us.
Thank you.
And good luck and mazel tov on all your future projects. And I'm sure we're going to work together again.
And I hope we have a time where we can all see each other in person.
Sooner than later, God willing.
Sooner than later.
Okay, and thank you, Neil.
Thank you for having me.
I think we're going to show a preview, correct, of the next film we're doing.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you again, Arik and Josh, for this wonderful opportunity. I also want to thank Danica Torchin. She's kind of behind the scenes right now, helping me with any technical support. So thank you again, Danica. And so yeah, we are going to show a trailer to our next film, which is a really unique and interesting film.
Hold on one second before you play the trailer.
Okay.
Too late?
Nope.
Yeah, I just want to put it in context. The Jewish Film Festival is part of a group that's bringing the current poet laureate of the United States, Joy Harjo, who is the first Native American to have that honor. And in conjunction, we're showing this important PBS documentary about the Indian schools, which is where the ethnic cleansing took place for many, many decades to the Native people. And we're having a very interesting webinar related to that. There's another program where Joy is going to be reading from her brand new book of poetry called American Sunset. And then Joy is going to be interviewed by Terry Tempest Williams, who's another very renowned author who was participating in the Jewish Film Festival last year. They're going to be talking about a brand new release of the first Norton anthology of Native American literature. So I hope you'll look to take advantage of those three programs. This is a preview of the Indian school film.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, we will be showing a webinar on the film on September 23rd at 5 p.m. It's going to feature Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis and Professor Andrew Wolford with the University of Manitoba. We will give you the link to the film that you can actually watch starting ASAP, and you'll have about a month now to watch that film, and then we will follow with that webinar on the 23rd of September. So Danica is going to show the film, and then we will also put on the registration for the webinar. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
So Justice, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
While Danica's, okay, she's queuing it up. I was just going to say Justice Montoya Lewis is the first Native American to be appointed to a Supreme Court in Washington State. Her father is Native American and her mother is Jewish. And Professor Wolford is a world-renowned expert on, scholar on genocide.
This is education that was promised us, that was guaranteed us through the treaties. But it wasn't. It's torture, brainwashing. They called us many different names. savage, dumb. And we got beat for looking like an Indian, smelling like an Indian, even speaking Indian. Everything I did.
Their de-Indianization program, it failed. But the toll was devastating. It destroyed our family. It destroyed that relationship we had with our mother. I could never regain that friendship, loveship relationship that I had with my mother. It wasn't there anymore. And that's what, to this day, I keep thinking that, you know, damn this government, what it did to me and what it did to thousands of other children across this country.
Okay. Neil, you want to sign us off?
Thank you, everybody. I did put the link to view the film in the chat room if you'd like to see it, and we will be emailing this out to everyone tomorrow as well. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Shalom.
Bye-bye.